Stanley Kubrick was one of the most innovative film directors in the history of cinema. When he died on March 7, 1999, he left behind an astonishing body of work. But because of the veil of mystery that surrounded this director, he also left behind many questions about his life and his career. They are revealed in a new documentary, Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures.
It was magnificent.
One of his pictures are equivalent to 10 of somebody else's.
Oh, Nicole. And shake his head.
Do you know him? And nobody ever really knew him.
He was known as a kind of future threat.
One of the all-time great motion picture makers.
A future threat to peace and quiet.
Legendary. Meanness.
There were times he drove me crazy.
He was a very lovable individual.
I love him 1 minute, and the next minute I hate him. I could kill him.
Perhaps the most intelligent person I've ever met.
He got fascinated with Nescafe commercials.
Have you seen the film Groundhog Day?
Because they told stories so fast.
Well, that's what it was like.
This man was born to push the envelope.
There is still a part of Stanley that's a great mystery to me.
And he always pushed the envelope.
And you must expect someone like that to be different from the rest of us.
I think we were too scared of him over here.
Everybody pretty much acknowledges he's the man. And I still feel that underrates him.
Joining me now for a look back at the life and work of Stanley Kubrick, his wife of 42 years, Christiane Kubrick, John Harlan, the director of this new documentary and Kubrick's longtime producer, and filmmaker Martin Scorsese. I am pleased to have all of them here to celebrate, is what we do here, celebrate an extraordinary career in film by a very interesting man. Let me talk about the filmmaker first. What made him so good?
Well, I think, for one thing, you know, you go to movies to be involved in the picture, to get a sense. I want to lose myself up in that screen for a few hours, and in a sense, know what it's like to be human, in a way. Then you come across certain kinds of films that, when you go to the theater and when you see them, you're completely surprised. They make you look at life a different way. They make you look at being human a different way. They touch areas that you don't want touched sometimes. Yeah. It's provoke you, which is good. And then there's that rarest of films where, when you see it continually over years, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, you still see more in it. And what's even better is that if you're making pictures, you go back to this well, this source, for A, inspiration, and B, maybe it should be A, is to learn how to make pictures. To learn, and remember, when you get tired, especially if you make 10 or 12 films in your life, and you get tired, you say, why, how can I get that better? What can I do? You look at that source, you look at that inspiration, you say, well, Kubrick wouldn't let it stay this way. Yes. He would have changed that angle. He would have worked it out. He would have tried to figure out getting more time to shoot the scene this way or that way. He would have really seen it to its end. And for that inspiration, I must say, it's looking at his films. And there's many ways I look at his films besides on a big screen. I like watching them on television. I like watching with the sound off. so I can see the rhythm.
You do
of
that? Watch him with the sound off.
Sometimes you can see the rhythm of the cutting and the camera moves. And when he cuts in a two-shot conversation, the classic one is Mr. Grady and Jack Torrance in the bathroom, crossing the invisible line. With the red background. The cuts. And when he cuts, when he destroys the invisible line, and when the shot gets tighter, on which line of dialogue?
Your son has a very great talent. I don't think you are aware how great it is. But he is attempting to use that very talent against your will.
Remember, Jan, I think isn't there a piece in the film where he says, "Don't you want to be perfect?" Does Stanley say something like that to someone? Don't you want it to be perfect?
Yes. Well, it's a story that goes like this. Tom Cruise and Sidney Pollack have a dialogue about the many takes and how long it took to do a particular scene. And Sidney says, "Oh, and after 3 weeks, we were still on this." And then Tom says, "Well," and Stanley said, "Sidney, I mean, I know, I didn't think it would take that long, but don't you want to get it right?"
Yeah, that's it. So what's the connect between the genius on film that we see and the genius in the man? I mean, what was it about him?
Well, I suppose the reason I loved him is because in his own life he had the same enormous attention to what is important. And not many people do that, so he was very interesting.
Yeah. You met him first when he came to California, yes? No. Why did you meet him first?
He hired me in Germany. He made Path of Glory, and he wanted, in the end, a lyrical note. And so he wrote a scene about a girl being dragged on a stage to a lot of rowdy soldiers singing a song. So he's looking for an actress.
Yeah.
And he hired me. That's how I met him.
Roll tape. Take a look at this.
Die Liebe nahm kein Ende mehr. Und als man ihm die Botschaft bracht, dass sein Herzliebchen im Sterben lag.
Now, the relationship started soon after that?
Yes, my shooting wasn't until the end of the film. And he sought me out at a masked ball.
Yeah.
There's a big carnival in Munich, Fastnacht, and all the people that work in theaters, they are hired for great Red Cross balls. So he got somebody to take him there, and he looked for me. And that's how I met him. So we were already living together when I shot the scene.
So you were living together when you shot the scene?
Yeah.
Where do you think, I mean, is it just this most difficult question to ask, what makes a great artist? I mean, what was it about?
Do you know?
I don't know, but I'm asking.
Hopefully it stays a secret. It's interesting that one cannot know. Just having seen AI, I realized that's what's interesting about people, if anything.
Well, you've just seen AI, the new Kubrick film that's finished by Steven Spielberg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
And you've seen it, and what does it tell you?
It pushes many buttons. I mean, and very, very clearly. It's got many layers. It's a wonderful film. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. And I was sort of in an emotional mangle sitting there. I'm very glad there were so many names to be read afterwards so I could pull myself together. And it's a very, very good film. And so what makes an artist? Thank God, you can't explain it.
Just hope that it's there.
Hope that you are one.
Continues. How did he think of himself? I mean, he started as a photographer.
Yeah, he hoped that he was good. He
hoped that he was
hoped
good.
that he was good. Yeah, he just really. I don't think I've ever heard him brag or be wonderfully secure. And I feel that also probably if you are that, you're also dead. I don't think this thing they all strive for, the great self-esteem. I think in the estimation of others, you have to be good. The self-esteem thing doesn't ever feel right.
No. What I love about him, and he shared this with Marty, is the choice of film themes. I mean, he clearly was someone, it seems to me, who wanted to treat cinematically great ideas or great human beings. He wanted to do Napoleon. He wanted to make a film about Paths of Glory was about war. Full Metal Jacket was about war. He wanted to make a film about men and women, which was Eyes Wide Shut. He wanted to make a film about Napoleon, which didn't happen because of financing and all that. He wanted to make a film about the Holocaust. But it was like someone who wanted to make films about things that interested him, that he could investigate and get his arms around and find out things. And yes?
That's absolutely true. He wanted to make films that mattered, that had not only good form, but also substance. And while his films are all very different from each other in form, they are not that different if you look very closely, because there is something that connects them all, and that is a very serious look at human nature, human frailty. It's interesting that he wanted to make a film about Napoleon. He read for 2 years about Napoleon. He was a great expert on Napoleon. What was it that interested him on Napoleon? That a man who is so talented, really one of the great talents of his time as a politician and as a military man, he ruined himself. It was, in the end, as Stanley always said, the emotions carried him away, and the emotions dictated, and not the knowledge, and not the sharp intellect and the analytical thinking. And this is true all the time, and this goes through his films. In 2001, the computer didn't malfunction. The computer was perfectly fine. It was it was operator error. It was the people who told the computer to not disclose information that screwed him up.
The opposite of what a computer is.
And all his films are very different. And when you asked Christiane before, how did he think of himself? The word genius was clearly not allowed.
Not allowed.
Absolutely.
If someone said, Stanley, you're a genius.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, it was almost, came close to insult. Because, Bach always said about himself, when he was called a genius, that genius is 10% talent, which is the mystery, which we don't know what it is. 90% hard work.
Yeah. It's about inspiration and perspiration, right?
Yeah. Hard work.
Yeah. And that's what it was almost like a...
He was a hard worker. I mean, some people call him obsessive. Yeah, what does it mean, a perfectionist? I consider it a compliment to be a perfectionist. Yes, he was. And he was very demanding. It was very difficult. But so what? Yeah.
As a student of film, which you are, and you've done television surveys of film, what is it that interests you most about him?
Well, I think as a filmmaker, you have to tell a story to the audience. And in so doing, you have to translate it through an image, which means that you direct the eye and the heart to look in a certain way, the way you want it to be, the way you want them to see it. And I never saw anybody tell a story that way. Pretty much every one of the films. You can study the shots. First of all, you don't go study the shot. You go look at the movie and it affects you or it doesn't affect you. Yeah. They affected me. And then I went back, when I began to learn more about filmmaking, I went back and I kept saying, why is that one so powerful? Why is it so powerful? And I went back and I tried to trace backwards the shots. And then eventually, it was, I started making films before there was video. So I had to do this going from theater to theater, So it was a different thing. I was trying to write down notes. Yeah. So why does something stay with you for so many years? Why did the tracking shots and Paths of Glory stay with you? It's really a person with a very strong, powerful storytelling ability, talent, genius, who could create a solid rock image that has conviction. And that is the image. What's in that frame stays in that frame. What isn't in the frame is out. And that's it. You have to compose within that frame. I didn't know he was a still photographer before.
Until you saw this documentary?
No, I knew that. I knew a few years later, because we never really actually met. But I've read over the years, Steve Spielberg told me about him and that sort of thing. And I said, of course, the still photography, once you get that image. But then it moves. Still cameras don't move, And so it had this extraordinary authority saying, look, I'm gonna tell you the story this way, and you're going to see it this way. Then you add to that what I feel about his pictures. When you add to that, assuming there's good and there's bad. Assuming something is wrong and something is right. What are we ultimately, as human beings, are we fundamentally good? Are we fundamentally bad? I think there's where you. That's why you can watch these films again and again and again. The Shining is fascinating for that. It's really all going on in his head, Jack's head.
Yeah.
You know, but those scenes that's so. Well, even Eyes Wide Shut, with the husband touching areas that he probably should have left alone. You know, being too confident about himself in a relationship. Remarkable film, remarkable. And the more you see Eyes Wide Shut, the more you get involved in that world. At a certain point, you don't want to because it's too painful. But it stands up. It holds. Bertolucci was saying this in Rome, and about Eyes Wide Shut.
You've been filming in Rome, yes.
Yeah. He said, "The Eyes Wide Shut is really good." I said, "Yeah,
he did say that. Yeah. Now, how did he
feel into his world? He said, "Yeah, I know."
How did you feel about Eyes Wide Shut?
I've lived with the story for a long time because he read it in. Ages ago, and in '68, when 2001 came out, he was going to do that next. And
from after 2001, it was going to be that.
He thought, I've got it. And I was, we were very young still, and I thought that is a very moisture-seeking story, very uncomfortable. Yeah. And I'd known plays by Schnitzler, and somehow I just really responded, as probably young people do, with fear to this and great discomfort. And
fear?
Yes, because he would have these stories at home and write at home, and he would, I don't know, it was just, we had fights. It was very strange, and you know, it's this sort of thing where I don't like the story. Why don't you like the story? And you're off.
Why don't you like the story?
And it becomes third degree. And then he read Clockwork Orange and then did that first. And I was much relieved at the time. And but I knew it wasn't going to go away. It was always there.
You knew something he was going to come back to eventually.
I was going to make it. And luckily, I think, being so much older, it was then a much wiser film, not so furious anymore.
He had wisdom
about what men can never know and what women will know men could never know and all that. And so I think it's a very wise and very thoughtful film, and I think very much in the spirit in which it was written.
Were you surprised by the reaction of the critics?
Yeah, I always am.
You are?
Yeah. I always imagine what will people criticize and what will they like, and I'm always wrong and always very indignant, as I suppose anybody who's honest is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hurts.
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 Because so many years, so much of your...
Yeah. Yeah, and it even stinks to admit it, you know. Ugh.
Roll tape, Eyes Wide Shut. Here it is.
It's because he wants to f me? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't think it's quite that black and white, but I think we both know what men are like.
You said, as we're watching this, he was outside the room. You said he's standing outside. The camera was...
Yeah, it's called a hothead. Forget the term. Yeah. The camera is on remote. And Stanley was sitting outside and watched at the monitor and controlled the movement of the camera. He was a good operator.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they were all alone. They didn't see anybody else. And they experimented. You see, what we could afford to do is take time.
You what?
We could afford to take time. So we took, it doesn't matter.
You could afford to take time.
We could afford to take time. Our budget was, I mean, we typically spend in a week what equivalent films spend in a day. We had a minute crew. I mean, Stanley always said, at the lunchtime, count the plates. If there are more than 50 plates to be washed up, something is wrong.
It's the way to do it.
Yeah, the more money, less freedom.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, you just have to control that unit, that actual production unit, day by day, and keep shooting.
Save your money for what's on the screen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But there was always this about Stanley that's reflected in your documentary. It always took him a while to make a film.
Yes. absolutely. I mean,
part of it's a perfection.
Yeah, and it's also, you see, he didn't plan to do it that way. I'll tell you, when we did the schedule, when the first assistant director, Brian Cook, and myself proposed an original schedule for Eyes Wide Shut, we proposed 24 weeks because we thought we wouldn't get much more. Yeah. He said, for 24 weeks? It's ridiculous. I mean, you know, these are two people talking.
We can go.
And I had to reduce it to 18. He meant it. He meant it.
Yeah, I can understand. I'm good to
so
hear.
How
it's
long
good to hear.
This will make you feel good.
Please.
Yeah. And how long did it take him?
Oh, it took a year.
A year?
Yes, it took a year. But, you know, it doesn't really matter. And Warner Bros., they were not overly alarmed. We went a little
They were not alarmed?
No, we went a little bit over budget.
Yeah, but that's because they love the
extent.
association with Terry. I mean, Terry Semel loved the association with
but they
Stanley.
wouldn't have loved the association had he gone over budget 300%. He didn't.
Yeah.
He always delivered.
Yeah.
He delivered the goods, and even if he went 10% over budget or so, that doesn't really matter that much. But he went sometimes over schedule, and for good reason. He didn't make any shortcuts. He wanted it to be as good as it can possibly be. That's why he was counting the dinner plates. Because if you have more than 50 dinner plates, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
You know, he knew that too many people are that's
but he wasn't arrogant, saying, "Oh, I'm so profound, everything
No,
takes
of
me
course
long."
not.
No, he was unhappy.
Yeah.
He would have liked to have been quicker.
What did chess mean to him?
Oh, he played it extremely well, and at some point, I think he made a living with it.
You mean he was a chess hustler or something like that?
In young New York, as a young man, yes. And
throughout his life, he played.
Yes, he did. And unfortunately, I can't do it at all.
Yeah.
And so I didn't play with him.
Would he play on the set?
Yes, during Strangelove and various other films, he played on the set.
Jacket.
Yeah, and also with in The Shining, and whenever he could.
Shining, whenever there was somebody who was really good.
Yeah, so he's looking for competition.
Yeah, and he then later in life he played with the computer.
Oh, he did. He became interested in the computer.
Yeah.
You say that with a certain exasperation.
Yes, because he was exasperated with it.
Now, what was the most exasperating thing about Stanley for you?
Exasperating. I think he was because of the aforementioned intensity. He tended perhaps to be domineering, but having all women in his family didn't always succeed. So we fought back. But without him, we're also like without an umbrella. It's very horrible. And he wasn't in the end exasperating. I mean, no. Yeah, I feel very lucky.
What does this film mean for you? This compilation of his life, in which you contributed early, private moments.
Yes, I was really nervous that because we were so sad, we tended to be sentimental and cute and indiscreet, and we had all the material to be so, and then we quickly took it away. Because this sort of gushing stuff that families do is vomit-inducing for others. And also, Stanley looked over our shoulder. He would have been very upset. So we were then very disciplined and very conscious of his
interesting thing.
presence.
Did you feel that he was looking over your shoulders? You were putting this together because you'd spent so much time with him as a filmmaker, and so he was there in the presence of a film about himself?
Only actually very little, because I was so used in representing him and being loyal to him that I didn't break that loyalty after his death. I had very specific aims. I wanted to show the man as he was, comprehensively. Now, you could ask, who was he?
Yeah.
The first answer is he was one of the most important American film directors and one of the most important artists of his generation. He was also a real New Yorker. He stayed a New Yorker. And I not only wanted to have certain people, his friends and other actors and colleagues, to contribute. I made myself an aim to specifically get 4 people who didn't work with him into this documentary. These were Ingmar Bergman, Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, and Steven Spielberg. And I'm very grateful that I got 3 of the 4. Ingmar Bergman unfortunately couldn't do it. And I think this was very, very important, Woody Allen and Martin Scorsese, because they were also New Yorkers, and they were people he admired. He loved their films. Yes. And Steven Spielberg, he always had a relationship with. They talked on the telephone all the time, and of course he offered him years ago to be the director of AI. And a wonderful scene, I think, in my documentary is when Steven Spielberg tells about this visit in his kitchen. And he says, well, and I didn't believe it, but Stanley actually offered me already a credit card, saying, oh, a Stanley Kubrick film, a Steven Spielberg AI. And then, however, and Stanley was very serious about it, because Stanley felt that Steven would have sort of more the knack for this kind of huge fairy tale that it is. Well, and then it didn't happen, and he both made other films. Stanley did Eyes Wide Shut, and I'm really, really, really very glad that then after Stanley's death a year later, it came to be that Steven Spielberg in fact did make AI, and did it beautifully. And I mean, I'm so impressed by the film, because he is really the only director who had the moral authority to take it on, because they had already collaborated, but however really put his own handwriting on it, which is also necessary. And yeah, so I had very specific aims with this film, and I hope
okay, but one of the aims was to, as you were talking about this, take Marty, who's so powerful in the film, because he was a filmmaker of the same generation.
And Stanley loved his films, and he was a New Yorker.
Yeah, and he was a New Yorker.
Yes.
But here is Martin Scorsese, who lives in New York.
Yeah.
Stanley lived throughout the latter part of his adult life in London.
You know what his daily newspaper was?
The New York Times.
The New York Times.
He should have loved the internet then. I mean, my goodness, he could get it all on.
Exactly.
You know?
We did in Rome. Yeah.
You did the same thing in Rome.
I did. My wife did. Like, I don't know how to use a computer.
But how do you explain the fact that he felt like, for creative purposes, he had to stay in?
We were sent
London.
there because in the beginning, to make Lolita, it was 40% cheaper.
Yeah.
Because of the ED plan, which is a tax thing, and then we were in England, and our children grew up there and went to school, and it became harder and harder to leave. And we also loved living there. It sort of happened. It wasn't a plan, we're now going to stay.
And it wasn't
there.
a reason to reject New York. I mean, in a sense of...
No, he didn't reject anything.
It wasn't a need for privacy, it was just habit.
No. By the time we were there for a while, we sort of were involved with other people and the children to school.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to take children out of school.
Of all the films he made, which one speaks to you most? Is there some part of this collected works that says to you...
I think it's hard. It's hard to choose one of the pictures. I have very strong feelings about Barry Lyndon and about 2001, and those two out of Lolita, out of Clockwork Orange, out of Eyes Wide Shut, and that sort of thing. But 2001, it's a strange thing. I mean, when I started at the Capitol Theater here, you know, as I said, you know, when his name, of course, there was a great deal written about the film, or written about the mystery of the film before it was released, and so when I went to see it, I expected much more than a film, and and as I said, we got it, you know. And I think what I guess I've been very affected by religion in my life, and that sort of that side of me found an extraordinary kind of comfort in the end of the film. A very beautiful moment.
Roll tape, 2001.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
You screened this, 2001, for the Vatican 6 months ago.
Yes. The Vatican invited, asked Warner Brothers, and you know, whether they could screen 2001, and invited Christiane and myself, and one of the cardinals gave a little speech of saying why this is such a monumental film. And Stanley also received a prize from the Catholic Church at the time for making 2001. He was actually very, very surprised because he had a bad time on Lolita with the Catholic Church. But they gave him a prize for 2001, and I mean, the reason is because it is a very reverential film. It's a big bow to the unknown creator. Stanley was not a religious man, but he was very, very respectful to the unknown and to the origin of what is.
Did he think after he wanted to make a film about the Holocaust,
yes,
and he didn't because of Schindler's List?
Correct.
Did he ever want to go back to that theme, or did that
I
idea?
don't think so, because he next in line was clearly for him Eyes Wide Shut and AI.
And AI. So he had 2 films out.
Yes. No, these were the next 2 films, you know, after he gave up on Aryan Papers, which is a wonderful script on a great book by Louis Begley called Wartime Lies.
Do you have a favorite?
People ask me that, and I've really thought about it. And no, I also have a weakness for Barry Lyndon, and I love 2001.
Why do you have a weakness for Barry Lyndon?
I just, I'm also a painter, so I just absolutely
many good
I'm wiped up by
the look of it, but also his character, the poor guy.
The character.
Oh, he's doomed from the beginning, and then that great last line where everyone's equal now, from Thackeray.
I did like. I was sort of nervous going into the Vatican and sitting there with 2001, and I thought this, and the film looked sort of small up on a big church wall. I thought, oh God, it's really a little agnostic prayer. You know, we are also thinking about these things, and it was very moving to see it there.
Tell me about the style. I mean, was this revolutionary at the time?
Oh, Lord, yes. I mean, you'd come off the style, a wonderful style coming out of England, I think, Richard Lester, The Hard Day's Night, The Beatles, the way MTV is affected now, films, MTV cutting, commercials were affecting, I think, oversimplification, I guess, but commercials were affecting cinema editing and logic, in a way, continuity at the time. And Richard Lester was like in the forefront of that, and the knack and how to use it, and knack and how to get it, I should say. And when 2001 came out, everything screeched the other way. It was amazing because it simply stopped how you normally would experience time and forced you again, with great authority, to look at a world, part of it in conjecture, part of it based in scientific fact, but to take you somewhere else completely where you've never been before, and it really made you, immersed you in the drama. I thought one of the great murder scenes of all time is the destruction of Hal, for example. It's an extraordinary murder scene, really. His murdering of the other scientists who were sleeping, or just as malfunction, you know, and the red. You begin realizing it's a person it's this machine taking their lives. But again, basically, as I say, it's a murder scene. But look how it's done.
I can feel it. My mind is going. There is no question about it.
You've never seen anything like it, I think. We didn't see anything like it up at that point. I still don't think you've been immersed in a world in that way. Certainly not in commercial, quote, commercial cinema, unquote, you know, at that time. Coming out, MGM presents, and suddenly you're taken to another time frame.
Right. What did he think of actors, and how did he choose actors?
Carefully, slowly. No, I mean, certainly. I mean, the decision to use Tom Cruise came very, very quickly, actually. That may have been an exception. And he was very, very
based
happy.
on a Cruise film, or based on just a...
he wanted a young man who was good-looking, successful, for this rather normal New York doctor. There wasn't supposed to be anything special about him. Rich, successful, beautiful wife, everything was fine. A whole world. We thought. Yeah. And I think his casting was brilliant in Eyes Wide Shut. Yes. And
how about Jack Nicholson in The Shining?
He was, I think, a complete master. Yes. No, that was a very deliberate choice. Yes. I don't remember that we had ever an alternative.
No,
I think
Jack Nicholson
he wanted Jack Nicholson right away. I mean, The Shining happened because he got Jack Nicholson.
I would put the point that Tom and Nicole were chosen even stronger, and that he wanted two people who are so perfect, great looking, very sexy, no trouble in any field, as only of their own making. They do it themselves.
Yeah.
They're not. Other people might have psychological problem or be very ugly or unsuccessful, and there would be side issues that would destroy the impact. There's nothing wrong for them, except what they're doing.
Roll tape. Here is a Shining. We'll come back to actors Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. Here it is.
Here's Johnny.
Great. Yeah, we should say this. You're talking, and as we see this, he makes the point that the camera, which is there, follows the acts back and then follows it forward
with great control.
Yeah.
It does. It's not handheld.
Yeah.
It pans calmly, but not calmly. There's a kind of tension when it reaches a certain position, then pans back. And it's a very interesting thing operating too, camera operating.
And you said all kinds of angles. I mean, he ran through about 15 doors and shot angles everywhere.
Yes, he covered himself fully because he didn't edit during shooting.
Right.
Which is an unusual way, maybe, of doing, but that was his choice. That's how he liked doing it.
He wanted to be able to edit after he got there. He wanted everything, every possibility. Yeah. And I said to Marty, it'd be great to watch movies with you because you notice so many things. And you said Stanley talked all the time. And you would say, just shut up.
Yes. Well, I would say, no, just be quiet for a moment. I want to hear what they're saying. Okay.
He loved movies.
Loved them. Yes.
Like this guy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Saw zillions of them.
So screenings, everything could get his hands on. If he heard about an actor, if he heard about a film, he'd call up Warner Brothers, somebody, give me this movie.
He saw single scenes over and over. He saw whole films. He saw some really dumb films.
Interesting.
Where there was one scene that he was waiting for.
Yeah.
He saw films where he was embarrassed being caught seeing them.
Oh, that's good to hear.
This is good therapy for you.
This is great. I didn't know any of this.
All those things you thought you were.
You late at night. You'll never know.
That's great. I'll just watch this by myself. Nobody will ever know.
But he preferred to have somebody with him.
He did, to talk and react.
He has also to change reels, because we change typically. I mean, if we watch the film, I changed and he went and changed the next one. But he was very fair. And we sometimes had 10 films sitting in the projection room on a weekend, And then, what shall we see? I have this and this. Oh, well, this is a 9-reeler. Oh, no, I don't know. Oh, let's get this one, 6 reels.
Older films, too. Older films, not just new ones.
Everything. A mixed bag.
Right.
And, he was a real movie buff. And we saw a lot of foreign films also. And he loved certain directors colossally, and he would never miss a film of these directors. It's not only Scorsese or Woody Allen. He would never miss Carlos Saura film.
Carlos Saura always wanted to see.
Absolutely, yeah. And or Spielberg film. All the major films, of course, he saw automatically, but also smaller films that you can't even get a print. Yeah, he adored. I mean, for example, the Swedish film called The Immigrants in the New Land.
Oh, yeah.
He was so enthused. We hired the costume designer for Barry Lyndon, and then that woman together came with Milena Canonero. And what's her name? Ulla Britt Söderlund. Yeah. And she died then later, unfortunately.
I think it was Tom Cruise or maybe someone else said you just loved being with him because of all just the fact that while he was difficult, tough, obsessive, driven, passionate. You agree with all this so far?
Yes, although he wouldn't confess to all of those.
But you would observe them to be true.
He would reserve a little. Not as he didn't like to hear being called all these things at once, not in one lump at any rate. And he was. I forgot what you asked me.
Well, I hadn't gotten there yet. I was going to say, but what was it like being on the set with Stanley Kubrick? Was he? I mean, did he? I think Tom Cruise said he just loved to have friends for dinner. He loved to be able to talk. He was interested in everything.
He talked all the time. He liked talking, and it was very interesting. I had the greatest floor show any woman's ever had all my life.
Meaning what?
Meaning interesting stories.
Constant.
Interesting life. Interesting. It was interesting.
He interpreted the news.
He interpreted the news for me. Now I don't. He told me what to believe and what not to believe in the news. And Yes, yes, he was interesting. And a horrible gossip.
A horrible gossip? All gossip is good, isn't it?
Yes, yes, he thought so.
So do I.
A really good gossip.
Everything about everybody, right?
Nitty-gritty,
Yeah.
everything.
But he got up in the morning thinking about movies, and he went to bed thinking about movies.
Yes, and he wouldn't have yes, of course he thought about films all the time, but I think he was just like a huge radar dish. Everything just took it in.
And sports was very important. Now this I couldn't get anything in my documentary. I mean, certain things have to be leave out. He absolutely adored good sports.
Like soccer, like football,
soccer, like tennis. Second week Wimbledon, for some reason everything quieted down in our office. He loved it. And I remember I saw a match with him between McEnroe and Boris Becker.
Oh, that was a great...
Absolutely. It was absolutely amazing. And we were riveted. And afterwards he said, I don't think any movie can come up to that level of excitement.
See, that's great. It is because you never know what's going to happen. That's the great thing about sports. Is
he loved it. Yeah, he loved it. It's an important part. Anyway, his first film was really about sports, was about boxing.
Yeah.
It's the day of the fight. And that is very well covered in the documentary. Yeah.
Take a look at this. This shows you, this is a man surrounded by women all the time. His wife and his kids. Here it is.
Do you know what kind of a camera that is? What it's called?
It's a home movie.
Powerflex it's called. Do you often find me in a temper?
Yes.
Oh, I don't believe that. I can't believe that.
Well, you better believe it because you just went in a temper a couple of minutes ago. Yeah, because you can't do a stupid film because everyone giggles. And because then I can't play like that.
I think I'm one of the most even-tempered people you'll ever meet.
Tell me about that.
He made family films.
All the time?
Yeah. And we insisted that he was to leave his director's hat behind. And they were usually us as victims to some new camera. And it was in sound. This was all new in those days. It was never working properly. And we were so horrible to him. We didn't do it well. We were impatient, and how much longer do we have to be here? And he said, I have not appreciated at all. He was. I mean, he was. It was very boring to do. It's very funny, and we're very glad we have the films now. But he would have us do all sorts of things. Well, you could imagine. Yeah. I think we're not the only family, actually, that did that.
No. Most families do. I mean, there's always a great story about larger families where the kids who were born first would say there'd be all these thousands and thousands of still or movies, and all of a sudden, by the fourth kid, nothing. Yeah, exactly. You've learned the list. How hard was it in making this for you to say, I have to be rigorous, I have to show the man that I know?
Well, it was very hard because...
But this was a man you loved, this was a man you worked with, this was a man you cared deeply about.
Yes, it was hard to leave things out. It requires an enormous discipline because it would have been much easier to make a 4-hour film. Yeah. A fantastic material, art department material from 2001 that nobody has ever seen. I would have loved to bring this in. But, you know, that was not the topic. I would have loved to have much more material, for example, with Martin Scorsese or Woody Allen or all the others. Many people are interviewed. I haven't used a single frame.
Who?
Ted Ashley, Marisa Berenson, Todd Field, Lily Sobieski, Vanessa Shaw. I had no room. I had no time. And you can't be too cutty. Yeah, if the cuts are too short...
You have to let it breathe.
Yes, you have to let it breathe. And you have to give the impression that actually you're not rushing. From time to time you have to come down and really be quiet and show a clip and let it run long enough, because if the audience feels you're rushing, then the whole thing is destroyed.
Or is there something about the life he lived and the way he lived his life, when you look at the talent, that might have enabled him, if he did it differently, to be even better as a filmmaker, as an artist? You know, did anything?
He was wondering.
Was he in any way counterproductive to his own work?
He didn't think so. He thought if he could find a reason why he can't knock out films faster, he would have liked to have known the reason. He thought he wants to really find a good story. And until he'd found the story, he wasn't going to do it. And it made him very unhappy when it wasn't happening, when he couldn't find it. And he sort of, God, is it that I just can't tell anymore? What's the matter with me? And it made him miserable when he had to give up the Holocaust film, for instance.
Yeah.
He had read so much about that and had become very depressed.
And Napoleon.
And Napoleon, he was furious that he couldn't get it. He still had his sneaking hope maybe he could still do it. Yeah. He did.
You have films like that you've made, that you just...
I guess over the years I made them for different reasons. Sometimes just to be able to do the process, to relearn how to make a picture. In some cases, yeah. When the industry changed, for example, and the type of film I was making in the early 80s was not accepted that much in Hollywood anymore, I went back and did independent film, After Hours, and then upped it again a year later with movie stars, Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, and Color of Money, to try to learn if I could survive. It's really experimenting, even to Cape Fear, seeing if I could do a film that, I don't know, that has another reason for being, rather than, it's really a learning process for me, more than anything else, and still fit within some sort of commercial framework. And that was the dangerous part. And I this is extraordinary, you know, it's, to hear this for the first time, too. I didn't know anything. I really had never spoken to her, you know, so it's really interesting because you're right, you have to wait for a story that's worth telling. You really do. Stanley Kubrick died at 70 years old, much too young. This is just a small part of what a life in film is about. And this is, you'll see here, the thing that we have been talking about is this Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures, a film by Jan Harlan, edited by Melanie Viner Cuneo. I thank you, Martin Scorsese, a man who loves film as much as anyone I know, but probably rivaled by Stanley Kubrick. Jan, thank you very much, and especially you for coming here and sharing this conversation about someone you spent your life with and shared joy and joy and joy. And he died in his sleep, age 70, in London. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.